I stared at my reflection, adjusting my blazer for the 10th time that morning. The promotion announcement would be made in exactly 2 hours, and for once, I wouldn't be standing in anyone's shadow, especially not Louisa's. My name is Amber, and I've spent 32 years being the other daughter. The one who wasn't quite as charming, quite as beautiful, or quite as perfect as my younger sister. But today was different. Today was mine. My phone buzzed. Speaking of the devil, Amber! I heard the big news! Louisa's voice dripped with honey, the same sweetness that had everyone wrapped around her finger since childhood. How did you? I started, but she cut me off. Oh, you know me. I have my ways. She giggled. I'm actually heading to your office today. Roger invited me to lunch. Isn't that wonderful? My stomach twisted. Roger, my boss, had been oddly interested in my sister ever since she showed up at last year's company Christmas party. Why are you having lunch with my boss, Louisa? Don't be so suspicious, silly. Can't I celebrate my big sister's success? The memory of my 8th birthday party flashed through my mind. Louisa, then 4, somehow managing to make even that day about her by performing an impromptu dance recital that had all our relatives cooing and forgetting about my cake. Sure, I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. I've got to go. Big day ahead. Ah, of course. Mom and Dad are so excited too. Though Mom did mention she wished you'd done your hair differently for the announcement photos. You know that straight look doesn't suit your face shape, darling. I hung up before she could continue, my hands shaking slightly. The same old Louisa, always knowing exactly where to stick the knife. My phone buzzed again. A text from Quinn, my best friend. Ready to crush it today, boss lady? I smiled, typing back. Born ready. Drinks later? Obviously. Someone's got to help you celebrate properly. The drive to work was a blur of nervous energy and coffee sips. As I walked through the office doors, David from accounting caught up with me. There's our new senior operations director. He beamed, falling into step beside me. It's not official yet, I reminded him, but couldn't help grinning. Please, it's been obvious for months. You practically rebuilt the entire operations system single-handedly. Roger would be insane not to promote you. The elevator dinged open and we stepped in. David pressed the button for the 4th floor. Speaking of Roger, he lowered his voice, heard some interesting chatter from HR. Apparently, there's been some unusual activity in the accounts lately. Before I could ask what he meant, the doors opened, and there stood Roger himself, his expensive suit perfectly pressed as always. Amber, just the person I wanted to see. His smile seemed oddly strained. Could you come to my office? There are some details about the announcement we need to discuss. I followed him, my heels clicking against the marble floors. Through the glass walls, I could see the office buzzing with anticipation. Someone had even brought in champagne. Roger's office was at the end of the hall, with the best view of the city. As we approached, I noticed movement inside, a familiar figure in a red dress. Surprise! Louisa spun around in Roger's chair, her perfect curls bouncing. I came early. I just couldn't wait to see my sister's big moment. Roger's hand pressed against my back, guiding me inside. Louisa was just telling me the most fascinating story about your childhood ballet recital. The one where you fell off the stage? I felt my face burn. That was 25 years ago. But so memorable. Louisa stood up, smoothing her dress. Roger and I were just discussing how important grace under pressure is in leadership roles. Something in their shared glance made my skin crawl. The champagne bottles outside suddenly seemed premature, and David's words about unusual account activity echoed in my mind. The announcement isn't for another hour, I said carefully. Perhaps we should— Oh, about that, Roger interrupted, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. There have been some changes to the plan. Why don't you sit down? As I sank into the chair across from his desk, watching Louisa perch herself on its edge with that familiar victorious smile, I realized this wasn't going to be my day after all. But unlike all those times in childhood, this time I wasn't going to just accept standing in her shadow. This time, I was going to fight back. Due to recent performance concerns, Roger cleared his throat, we've decided to restructure the senior operations director position. I gripped the armrests of my chair. Performance concerns? My last review was exemplary. Yes, well, Roger shuffled some papers on his desk, not meeting my eyes. Louisa has brought some issues to my attention. Louisa, I turned to my sister. What could you possibly know about my work performance? She leaned forward, her perfectly manicured hand patting my knee. Oh, sweetie, I was just looking out for you. Remember that merger proposal you worked on last month? The one you were so proud of? My blood ran cold. I'd only mentioned that proposal to her during a family dinner. Roger and I got talking, she continued, and I remembered how you said you'd borrowed some ideas from your old company's confidential files. I just couldn't bear the thought of you getting in trouble later. That's not what I said! I stood up so quickly, my chair rolled backward. I said I used my experience from previous projects. There's nothing confidential about that. Roger raised his hands placatingly. Amber, please. This isn't just about the merger proposal. There are other concerns. What other concerns? I've doubled our operational efficiency. I've brought in 3 major clients. You've also been rather aggressive in your management style, Louisa interjected smoothly. Remember poor Jenny from accounting? Roger tells me she almost quit after your confrontation about those missing receipts. Jenny was embezzling company funds. I caught her and reported it, as was my duty. Perhaps, Roger said, but there are ways to handle these situations with more finesse, which is why we're excited to announce that Louisa will be joining our team as a special consultant for corporate culture and communications. The room spun. She doesn't even work in this industry. I've been taking some online courses. Louisa smiled brightly. And Roger thinks my people skills will be invaluable. I bet he does, I thought, watching how close they were standing. So what happens to my promotion? I asked, already knowing the answer. We'll be creating a new position for you, Roger said. Assistant Operations Manager, reporting directly to the new Senior Director once we find the right candidate. A demotion. They were actually demoting me. My phone buzzed. Quinn asking if I wanted her to grab lunch later. The champagne bottles outside caught my eye again, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. I need some air, I muttered, heading for the door. Oh, and Amber, Louisa called after me. Mom wanted me to remind you about dinner on Sunday. She's making your favorite. Well, what she thinks is your favorite. I told her you actually prefer chicken to salmon now, but you know how she never listens to me about you. I barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up my breakfast. As I rinsed my mouth, memories flooded back. Louisa accidentally spilling wine on my graduation dress. Louisa dating my high school crush 2 days after he broke up with me. Louisa somehow always being there when things went wrong in my life. The bathroom door opened, and David slipped in, ignoring the women's room sign. I saw what happened, he said quietly. You okay? I laughed bitterly. Okay? My sister just torpedoed my career and is probably sleeping with my boss. I'm fantastic. About that. David glanced around before lowering his voice. Remember what I said about unusual account activity? I've been tracking some strange transfers. Large sums moving through shell companies, all authorized by Roger. I straightened up. What kind of transfers? The kind that get people fired or arrested. I haven't gathered enough evidence yet, but the door started to open, and David quickly ducked into a stall. Louisa walked in, her red dress a slash of color in the sterile bathroom. There you are. I was worried about you, running off like that. Sure you were. She sighed dramatically. I know you're upset, but this is really for the best. You've always pushed yourself too hard, tried to be something you're not. This way, you can focus on what you're good at, supporting others. I met her eyes in the mirror. Like I've always supported you? Exactly, she beamed, missing or ignoring my sarcasm. Now I should get back. Roger and I have lots to discuss about the new corporate culture initiatives. After she left, David emerged from the stall. I have access to the financial records, he whispered. If you want to know what they're really up to. I thought about all the times I'd taken the high road, all the times I'd let Louisa win to keep the peace. Not this time. Show me everything, I said. Late that night, David and I hunched over his laptop in an empty conference room, surrounded by spreadsheets and financial reports. See these transactions? David pointed to a series of numbers. Every month, exactly $250,000 gets transferred to this offshore account, then split into smaller amounts and distributed to these shell companies. And Roger authorizes all of these? His digital signature is on everything. But here's where it gets interesting. David pulled up another document. 3 months ago, one of these companies hired a new consultant. Look at the name. My stomach dropped. Louisa Russell Consulting, LLC. Registered just 4 months ago. She's been getting monthly payments of $50,000 for strategic advisory services. The door handle jiggled, and we froze. I quickly switched off the laptop screen as Roger's assistant walked in. "Oh, sorry, I didn't know anyone was still here," she said, grabbing a forgotten coffee mug. After she left, I let out a shaky breath. "We need somewhere safer to do this." "My place?" David suggested. "I have everything backed up there anyway." An hour later, we sat in David's apartment, papers spread across his dining table. Quinn perched on the counter, nursing a glass of wine. "So your sister's not just sleeping with your boss, she's helping him embezzle company money?" Quinn whistled. "That's low, even for Louisa." "We don't know they're sleeping together," I said automatically, then caught their skeptical looks. "Okay, they probably are." "The question is," David said, "what's the money actually for? These shell companies all seem to connect to competitors in some way." My phone buzzed, a text from Louisa. "Having dinner with Roger. He has such wonderful ideas for the company's future. You'll love working with both of us." I threw my phone onto the couch. "I might have a way to find out more," Quinn said slowly. "My cousin works at the SEC. If there's any ongoing investigations into these companies—" "That could take too long," I replied. "Roger's probably already working on pushing me out completely. We need something concrete and fast." David's fingers flew across his keyboard. "Roger keeps his most sensitive files on an encrypted drive in his office. If we could access that—" "How? He never leaves his office unlocked." Quinn grinned. "Doesn't he have that charity golf tournament tomorrow?" The next day, I watched through the glass walls as Roger left for his tournament, Louisa on his arm in a tiny golf skirt. As soon as they disappeared, I headed to his office. "Security cameras?" I asked David through my earpiece. "Looped. You have 20 minutes before the system resets." My hands shook as I used the master key I'd borrowed from facilities maintenance. Inside Roger's office, everything screamed wealth and power, from the leather chairs to the abstract art probably worth more than my annual salary. "The drive should be in his desk drawer," David's voice crackled. "It's USB, black with a red stripe." I found it exactly where he said, but as I reached for it, voices approached. "Just forgot my lucky golf ball," Roger's voice carried down the hall. "Hide!" David hissed unnecessarily. I ducked behind the massive leather couch just as Roger and Louisa entered. "Are you sure about this?" Louisa's voice was uncertain for once. "What if she finds something?" "Impossible. Everything's encrypted. Besides, your sister's always been predictable. She'll accept the demotion like she accepts everything else." "I don't know. She seemed different yesterday. Trust me, sweetheart. By the time we close this deal with Global Tech, we'll both be too rich to care what Amber thinks." My heart pounded so loud I was sure they'd hear it. Finally, after what felt like hours, they left. I waited 30 seconds, then grabbed the drive and ran. Back at David's apartment, we stared at the encrypted files. "I can't crack this," David admitted after an hour. "We need help. I might know someone," Quinn said. "Remember Kyson? He's head of ethics and compliance now. He's basically a computer genius. Can we trust him? He's been trying to catch Roger in something shady for months. But," Quinn hesitated, "if we bring him in, there's no going back. This becomes official." I thought about Roger's smugness, Louisa's constant betrayals, All the times I'd swallowed my pride and stepped aside. Make the call. As Quinn dialed, I got another text from Louisa. Had the most amazing day with Roger. He says you seemed upset yesterday. Remember what Mom always says, you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. I looked at the drive in my hand, thinking of their conversation in the office. Whatever deal they were planning with Global Tech, whatever they were embezzling money for, I was going to expose it all. Time to show them just how unpredictable I could be. Kyson's office felt like a confessional booth. Small, private, and thick with tension. He studied the data on his screen, occasionally muttering under his breath. "This is bigger than corporate embezzlement," he finally said. "Roger's been selling company secrets to Global Tech through these shell companies. Your sister's been acting as the go-between. Can you prove it?" I leaned forward. "Give me an hour with this drive." He cracked his knuckles. "But Amber, once I start digging officially, I can't stop. Are you ready for what this could do to your sister?" Before I could answer, my phone lit up with Roger's name. "Where are you?" His voice was sharp. "We have a department meeting." "On my way," I said, trying to sound normal. "Bring the quarterly reports. And Amber, let's discuss your recent, unauthorized overtime hours." My blood ran cold. Had he noticed the security footage? The department meeting was excruciating. Roger sat at the head of the table, Louisa perched beside him like a queen. She'd somehow acquired a company laptop and badge already. "As part of our new corporate culture initiative," Louisa announced, "we'll be conducting detailed reviews of all departmental activities, starting with operations." "Speaking of operations," Roger added, "Amber, those overtime hours you logged last week, what exactly were you working on?" "Project documentation," I said smoothly, "for the handover you requested." "Interesting." He shared a look with Louisa. "Because IT reported some unusual access attempts to secure servers during those hours." "Really?" I forced a confused smile. "Must be a system glitch." "Must be," Louisa agreed sweetly. "Though you do look tired, sis. Maybe you're working too hard. Mom's always worried about your stress levels." After the meeting, David caught up with me in the break room. "They know something's up," he whispered. "Roger's been asking a T to audit all recent system access. We need more time." I grabbed my coffee. "Kyson's still working on—" "Working on what?" We spun around. Louisa stood in the doorway, her head tilted innocently. "The quarterly reports." I recovered quickly. "Kyson from Ethics needs them for compliance review." "Ethics?" Something flickered across Louisa's face. "Why would Ethics need operational reports?" "Standard procedure," David jumped in. "New company policy." "Really?" Louisa's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'll have to discuss that with Roger. We wouldn't want anyone wasting time on unnecessary reviews." After she left, David grabbed my arm. "We need to warn Kyson." But when we reached his office, it was empty. His computer was dark, and the encrypted drive was gone. "Looking for this?" Roger's voice came from behind us. He held up the drive, Louisa at his side. "Interesting choice of lunch break activity, Amber. Corporate espionage doesn't suit you." "Neither does fraud," I shot back, "or selling company secrets." "Careful," Louisa warned. "These kinds of accusations could really damage your career. And your severance package." "Where's Kyson?" David demanded. "Called away to an urgent meeting," Roger smiled. "He'll be quite busy for the next few days. Now, about your employment status." "You can't fire me without cause," I said. "And you can't hide what you're doing forever." "Hide?" Louisa laughed. "Amber, sweetie, you always see conspiracies where there's just business. Remember when you thought I deliberately ruined your college interview? Sometimes things just don't go your way. The interview you showed up to drunk, making a scene about your boyfriend dumping you? That wasn't an accident, Louisa. None of this is." Roger stepped between us. "I'm being generous here, Amber. Resign quietly, sign an NDA, and we'll provide excellent references. Fight this, and what?" Quinn's voice rang out. She stood in the doorway, phone raised. "Sorry, what were you saying about NDAs and threats? The recording's a little unclear." Roger's face darkened. This is a private conversation. Not anymore. Quinn smiled. By the way, Kyson's not at a meeting. He's with the board of directors. Turns out he made copies of everything before you grabbed that drive. Louisa's perfect composure cracked. You're bluffing. My phone buzzed. A text from Kyson. Board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Bring everything you have. They want to hear it all. I held up my phone. Want to bet? For the first time in our lives, I watched Louisa's confidence crumble. Roger grabbed his phone, barking orders as he strode away. Louisa lingered, her face a mix of anger and something else. Fear. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Because, I said, it's time someone showed you what it feels like to stand in someone else's shadow. They're going to fight back hard, Kyson warned, spreading documents across my dining room table. Roger's already called his lawyers, and your sister's been reaching out to board members all afternoon. Quinn poured more wine. Let them try. We have the evidence. Evidence they'll try to discredit, David added, scrolling through his laptop. Roger's already claiming the financial records were tampered with. My phone buzzed. Mom calling for the 5th time. I declined again. Louisa called them, didn't she? Quinn guessed. Probably crying about how I'm trying to ruin her exciting new career opportunity. I rubbed my temples. She's always been good at playing the victim. Focus, Kyson interrupted. The board meeting is in 12 hours. We need to make our case bulletproof. A knock at the door made us all freeze. Through the peephole, I saw Louisa, mascara smeared. I know you're in there, she called out. Please, Amber, 5 minutes. Quinn grabbed my arm. Don't. But I was already opening the door. Louisa burst in, looking less polished than I'd ever seen her. You have to stop this. Why? Afraid of people finding out who you really are? You don't understand. She paced my living room. Roger has connections, powerful ones. If this gets out, it won't just hurt him. Should have thought of that before you helped him steal company secrets. I didn't know. She spun around. Not at first. He said he just needed someone to help smooth things over with competitors. By the time I realized what was happening. You were in too deep? Kyson asked coldly. And making too much money to care? Louisa's face crumpled. He said he loved me. Right, I laughed bitterly. Like Tommy said he loved you in high school? Right before you told him I'd been cheating on him? That was different. We were kids. And now? What's your excuse now, Louisa? She sank onto my couch. Mom and Dad will never forgive me if this goes public. That's what you're worried about? Their approval? I shook my head. You never had to worry about that. You've had it since the day you were born. That's not true. Do you know how hard it is, being the pretty one, the charming one, everyone expecting perfection all the time? David snorted. Poor you. Get out, I said quietly. You've got 12 hours to decide, Louisa. Either you come clean to the board yourself, or I'll do it for you. After she left, Kyson pulled out his phone. I recorded that whole conversation. Could be useful tomorrow. You think she'll turn on Roger? Quinn asked. No, I said. She'll do what she always does. Find a way to make herself the sympathetic character in all this. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mom. Your sister's crying her eyes out. What have you done now? Classic, Quinn muttered, reading over my shoulder. Want me to call her? Set her straight? No. I turned back to the documents. Tomorrow isn't about convincing my parents. It's about justice. We worked through the night, organizing evidence, preparing presentations. Around 3 a.m., Kyson pulled me aside. There's something you should know, he said quietly. I did some digging into Roger's connections. He's got dirt on 2 board members. They might try to shut this down before you can present everything. What kind of dirt? The kind that makes our evidence look like a parking ticket. He hesitated. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Roger's offering a pretty generous severance package. I thought about Louisa's tears, probably being performed right now for our parents. About Roger's smug confidence that I'd back down like always. What time's the meeting? 9 a.m. sharp, boardroom A. I'll be there. After everyone left, I stood at my window, watching the city lights. My phone buzzed one last time. Louisa again. I've told Roger I'm backing out. You win. Just please don't show them that recording. I'll quit, move away, whatever you want. Just don't destroy my life. For a moment, I felt a twinge of sympathy. Then I remembered every sabotaged opportunity, every orchestrated humiliation, every time she'd smiled while twisting the knife. See you tomorrow, sis, I texted back. Quinn had left a sticky note on my laptop. Remember, karma's only a bitch if you are. Make it count. I smiled, adding it to my presentation folder. Tomorrow would change everything, and for once, I wasn't going to feel guilty about standing in the spotlight. For once, Louisa would know what it felt like to be the other sister. The morning of the board meeting, I arrived early to find Roger already in the lobby, speaking intensely with two men in expensive suits. Amber! He broke into a practiced smile. Just the person I wanted to see. These gentlemen are from our legal department. They'd like a word. Actually, Kyson's voice rang out behind me. Any conversations should include the company's ethics counsel, which would be me. The lawyers exchanged glances. One stepped forward. Ms. Russell, we have a revised severance package to discuss. Triple your current salary, Roger added smoothly, plus a glowing recommendation and full benefits for 2 years. Trying to buy my silence? I clutched my presentation folder tighter. That's not going to work. Think carefully, Roger's smile tightened. Your future in this industry, is already compromised? Quinn appeared, coffee in hand. Funny, I was just talking to my cousin at the SEC about that. Roger's face darkened. This is a private matter. Not anymore. David walked up, laptop under his arm. The board's waiting. Inside the boardroom, tension crackled. 8 board members sat around the massive table, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Louisa sat in a corner, wearing a conservative black dress I'd never seen before. Before we begin, one of the lawyers stood, we should discuss the confidentiality implications. Actually, Kyson interrupted, as ethics counsel, I've already filed this case with the SEC. Confidentiality isn't an option anymore. Chaos erupted. Roger's lawyers huddled together, whispering furiously. 2 board members stood up, looking ready to leave. Sit down, a sharp voice commanded. An elderly woman at the head of the table, Margaret, the board chair, rapped her knuckles on the wood. I want to hear what she has to say. I connected my laptop to the projector, hands steady despite my racing heart. The first slide appeared, a complex web of financial transactions. Over the past year, I began, Roger Fleming has orchestrated a systematic theft of company secrets and funds. Allegations without proof, one of the lawyers interjected. Really? I clicked to the next slide. These transfers to offshore accounts, all authorized by Roger, total over $3 million. Standard consulting fees, Roger said smoothly. To shell companies you own? David stepped forward, pulling up additional documents. Companies that then transferred information to Global Tech? The board members leaned forward, murmuring, and let's talk about your newest consultant. I turned to Louisa, who seemed to shrink in her chair. My sister, who suddenly formed an LLC just in time to receive $50,000 monthly for undefined services. I can explain. Louisa stood up, her voice trembling. Roger told me it was all legitimate. I was just trying to help facilitate business relationships by passing confidential information to our biggest competitor. Kyson projected new documents. We have emails, Louisa, very detailed ones. This is ridiculous, Roger snapped. You can't prove. Actually, Quinn stepped forward, phone in hand. We can. Remember that golf course conversation yesterday about being too rich to care once the Global Tech deal went through? I have it recorded. The color drained from Roger's face. And there's more, I continued, but suddenly the boardroom doors burst open. My mother stormed in, father trailing behind her. "Stop this at once! How dare you try to humiliate your sister like this?" "Mrs. Russell," Margaret's voice cracked like a whip. "This is a closed board meeting. Security!" "No, wait!" Louisa jumped up. "Mom, please just go. This is my fault. I did this, all of it." The room fell silent. "What are you saying?" Mom stared at her golden child. "I helped Roger steal company secrets." Louisa's voice broke. "I knew it was wrong, but the money. And he said he loved me. And I just wanted to win," I finished quietly, like always. Security arrived, escorting my parents out. Mom's face was a mask of shock and disappointment, an expression I'd seen countless times, but never directed at Louisa. "Well," Margaret stood up, "I believe we've seen enough. Roger, you and your lawyers can wait outside while we discuss next steps. Louisa, the SEC will want to speak with you." As they filed out, Louisa paused beside me. "I really am sorry," she whispered, "for everything." I didn't answer. 28 years of manipulations and betrayals couldn't be erased with one apology. "Amber," Margaret called, "please stay. The board has another matter to discuss." Quinn squeezed my shoulder as she left with David and Kyson. Through the glass walls, I could see Roger being escorted out by security, Louisa following with SEC agents, and my parents watching in disbelief. For the first time in my life, all eyes were on me, and I wasn't in anyone's shadow. "Well," Margaret leaned back in her chair, "this has been quite the morning." The remaining board members murmured in agreement. Through the glass walls, I could see the chaos unfolding. Security escorting Roger out, SEC agents conferring with Kyson, my parents arguing with Louisa in the lobby. "Your investigation was thorough," one board member noted. "Perhaps too thorough. Some might say obsessive." "With respect," I straightened my spine. "When someone tries to destroy your career and steal from your company, thoroughness is a virtue." "Ah, and the fact that it was your sister?" Another member raised an eyebrow. "That didn't cloud your judgment?" "That's exactly why my judgment wasn't clouded," I replied. "I know exactly who Louisa is and what she's capable of. I've had a lifetime of experience." Margaret's lips twitched. "Tell me, what would you do about global tech?" "Excuse me? They clearly have our proprietary information. How would you handle it?" I blinked, then realized this was a test. First, I'd audit everything Roger and Louisa sent them. Then, I'd approach their board directly. They're probably unaware their executives were engaging in corporate espionage. The threat of exposure would force a settlement. And internally? Full transparency with our employees, new security protocols, and, I took a deep breath, a complete restructuring of the operations department. The boardroom door opened and Quinn burst in, ignoring the protests of security. "Sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this." She held up her phone. "Roger just tried to delete the entire operations server remotely." "Tried?" Margaret asked sharply. "David caught it in time. He's locking everything down now, but—" "That server contains all our client data," I explained to the board. "If he'd succeeded—" "He's being arrested as we speak," Quinn added. "But he's demanding to talk to you, Amber. Says he has a deal to offer." "No deals." Margaret stood up. "Amber, go with security to Roger's office. We need to know exactly what he had access to." In Roger's office, David was already working on Roger's computer while Kyson documented everything. "His personal files are corrupted," David reported, "but I found something interesting. Emails to Global Tech dating back 2 years. Louisa wasn't his first accomplice." "Who was?" "Board member James Mitchell. That's why Roger was so confident about shutting down the investigation." My phone buzzed. Louisa calling. I declined. "She's been calling nonstop," Quinn said. "The SEC agents want her to wear a wire. Get Roger to confess everything." "She won't do it," I said. "She never implicates herself." But 5 minutes later, Kyson rushed in. "Your sister just agreed to cooperate. She's meeting Roger now." We crowded around Kyson's tablet, watching the live feed from Louisa's wire. Roger sat in a holding room, his perfect suit now wrinkled. "Baby, you have to help me," he pleaded. "Tell them it was all my idea." "Like you told James Mitchell to do?" Louisa's voice was steady. "I found the emails, Roger. I know I wasn't the first. That was different." "Was it? Was I different? Or just convenient because I was Amber's sister?" Roger's face hardened. "You really want to play it this way? Remember who suggested selling to Global Tech in the first place. Your fingerprints are all over this." "Yes," Louisa agreed. "They are. That's why I'm making a deal." The door burst open, SEC agents flooding in. Roger's face contorted as he realized what had happened. "You little—" The feed cut off. "Well," Quinn whistled, "guess she finally picked the right side." My phone buzzed again. A message from Margaret. "Board meeting, now." Back in the boardroom, Margaret stood at the head of the table. "James Mitchell has resigned," she announced. "Roger and Louisa will face federal charges, which leaves us with several vacant positions to fill." She turned to me. "The board has voted. We'd like to offer you the position of Chief Operations Officer, effective immediately." I stared at her. "COO? But—" "You uncovered corporate espionage, protected company assets, and demonstrated exceptional leadership under pressure." She smiled. "Unless you'd prefer the assistant manager position Roger suggested." Before I could respond, there was a commotion outside. Through the glass, I saw my parents arguing with security again. "Go," Margaret nodded. "Handle your family first. We'll draw up the paperwork." In the lobby, Mom looked lost. "I don't understand. Louisa said, she always said." "She lied, Mom. She always lies." "But she's your sister." "Yes," I agreed. "She is. And now she's facing the consequences of her actions, just like I've faced the consequences of being her sister for 28 years. Dad touched Mom's arm. "We should go home. Process this." As they left, Quinn appeared beside me. "You okay?" I watched my parents' retreating backs, thinking of all the times they'd believed Louisa over me. "Actually," I smiled, "I'm great. I have a new job to prepare for." The morning sun streamed through my new corner office windows as I reviewed the final settlement papers. Global Tech had agreed to pay triple damages, plus a public apology. Roger faced 15 years in federal prison, and Louisa had gotten a reduced sentence in exchange for her cooperation. A knock at my door made me look up. David entered, grinning. "The new security protocols are live. No one's accessing our servers without triple authentication now." "Good." I signed the last document. "How's the new team settling in?" "They're actually excited about the changes. Transparency looks good on this company." My phone buzzed. A text from Quinn. "Turn on the news." I grabbed the remote, switching on the office TV. Roger's face filled the screen as reporters swarmed him outside the courthouse. "No comment," he snarled, trying to shield his face. The camera panned to Louisa, looking small in a plain blue suit. "I made terrible mistakes," she was saying. "I betrayed my company, my family, and myself. All I can do now is try to make it right." "Think she means it?" David asked. Before I could answer, my office door opened again. Mom stood there, looking uncertain. "Security called up," I said. "You can come in." She stepped inside, clutching her purse. "Your father wanted to come, but he's still processing?" She nodded, then noticed the TV. "Oh." We watched in silence as Louisa was led away by her lawyers. "I got your letter," Mom finally said. The letter I'd written, explaining everything. Not just Roger and Louisa, but 28 years of manipulation, favoritism, and hurt. "And?" I kept my voice neutral. "I've been seeing a therapist." She twisted her wedding ring. "She's helping me understand patterns, behaviors." She took a deep breath. "Mistakes." "Mom?" "No, let me finish. I failed you, Amber. I let Louisa's brightness blind me to her cruelty, to your pain." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry." The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Russell, the board meeting starts in 5 minutes." I have to go. I stood up. Of course. Mom turned to leave, then stopped. Would you, would you consider having dinner with us? Just to talk? I thought about all the family dinners where I'd been invisible, all the times my achievements had been overshadowed by Louisa's latest drama. I'll think about it. In the boardroom, Margaret was reviewing the quarterly projections when my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Louisa's prison email. I know you probably won't read this, it began, but I need you to know something. You weren't the only one in a shadow. I was trapped in the person everyone expected me to be. The pretty one, the charming one, the one who could do no wrong. It was exhausting, and it made me cruel. I see that now. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know that you've always been the stronger one, the better one. I'm sorry it took prison for me to admit that. Amber? Margaret's voice snapped me back. The new organizational structure? I put my phone away and stood up, presenting the changes I'd designed. As I spoke, I saw Quinn and David through the glass walls, giving me thumbs up. Beyond them, Mom still lingered in the lobby, watching with what looked like pride. One last item, Margaret said when I finished. The Ethics Board has recommended annual reviews of all departments to prevent another Roger situation. We'd like you to oversee that initiative. I smiled. Actually, I have someone in mind for that role. I gestured to David. He's the one who first noticed the suspicious transactions. He didn't look away or make excuses. He did the right thing. Excellent choice. Margaret stood up. Well, I believe that concludes our business for today. As the board filed out, Quinn bounded in. Drinks? We're celebrating your first month as COO. Actually, I glanced at the lobby where Mom waited. I have dinner plans. Family dinner? Quinn raised an eyebrow. You sure? I looked at my phone, at Louisa's message. Then at Mom, who'd taken the first step toward change. At David, who'd risked his job to expose the truth. At Quinn, who'd never let me stand alone. Yes, I said. I'm sure. It's time to build something new. I gathered my things, feeling the weight of the corner office keys in my pocket, the respect in my colleagues' eyes, the strength in my own voice. For the first time in my life, I wasn't defined by being Louisa's sister. I was simply Amber, and that was more than enough. Coming? I asked Quinn and David. They fell into step beside me as I walked toward Mom, toward dinner, toward whatever came next. Not in anyone's shadow, but in my own light, 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 but in my own light.